Hello, everyone. Over 200 million people from all over the world suffer from osteoporosis. Well, the stats are staggering, with 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men will experience osteoporotic fracture in their lifetime. In our session today, we are going to explore how exercise can help with bone health. I am Amita from Narishta, a platform for natural and holistic therapies. Presenting this session today, we have Beth Perry from New York. Beth is physical therapy assistant, LMP, and a wellness coach for over 15 years. Beyond her qualifications, she is also certified in Parkinson's cycle, mat Pilates, personal trainer, and a fitness instructor for kids and teens. She's also trained in yoga, mindfulness, and rehabilitation. Welcome, Beth.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Great.
Yes. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about exercise and osteoporosis. And thank you so much for having me today to talk about this. This is a real passion of mine. I think the important part to start with is to talk just what is osteoporosis. So a lot of times people are not aware that they have the osteoporosis diagnosis because it's called the silent disease. Typically, people that have osteoporosis find out they have it when they have a fracture. So that is a real telltale sign that you do have osteoporosis. So the most common fracture sites are going to be the hip, the spine, and the wrist. And there's a lot of risk factors. A lot of people that are in my class, they want to know like what causes osteoporosis. So some of the risk factors in osteoporosis is just having inactivity, not being someone that does a lot of activity or muscle strengthening or exercising, smoking. If you haven't already quit smoking, there's more than one reason to quit smoking, but osteoporosis is a biggie. High cortisone or a history of steroid use. So if you're one of those that get those shots in your knees to make them feel better, a lot of that cortisone can really wear and tear on your bone density. Heavy alcohol consumption, hypothyroidism, high levels of mental stress, because the more stressed we are, the more cortisol builds on our system, and that goes right back to the cortisone therapy and the high cortisone levels in your body. And people that have had a premature hysterectomy of before the age of 40. So these are some factors and some risk factors that do play a role in osteoporosis. And I found this statistic to be really crazy. So your peak bone mass density happens at age 30. So I don't know about you, Amita, but who's thinking about their bone health when you're 30 years old, going out of your 20s into your 30s? So, so the earlier you can start exercising, the better. Prevention is always better than the aftermath, but the good news is osteoporosis can be treated many, many ways.
That's great. Yeah, you're right. At the age of 30, you just want to get parties and do that.
Yeah, you either are the person that has the kids and the family at that age, or you're focusing on your career, or you're going out and having a good time with your friends. You're not thinking about the benefits of exercise in your bone health.
Absolutely.
So the benefits of exercise and bone health, there's so many benefits to exercise. Today specifically, we're going to be talking about bone health. So the side effects of exercise, besides that DOMS, that delayed onset of muscle soreness, they're always desirable. So with exercise, you can actually stimulate the production of bone growth without stimulating the reabsorption, which is really important. We'll talk a little bit about balance, because our body builds bone as well as cleans it out. So you really want to find that happy balance between the two. There's actually this molecule, it's called the PGCI alpha, or 1 alpha. They are generated through exercise, and they are a really powerful anti-inflammatory agent. They reduce cancer, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune illness, and Alzheimer's disease. The side effects of exercise, again, they're almost always desirable. They improve your posture. They improve your activities of daily living. They conserve muscle tissue. Like we said before, it helps build bones without that setting of that reabsorption. It conserves bone tissue. It improves your reaction time, which is really important when we talk about fractures. Because when you start to stumble and start to fall, a lot of people either go with it or they have that quick reaction time where they're able to self-right and keep themselves upright. Because again, with osteoporosis, it's always about the fall risk. It's your fall risk and not fracturing those bones. And it improves your balance. So fracture risk, like we were talking about before, there's a couple different things that really help you to prevent your fracture risk. So sarcopenia, which is basically low muscle density. So people that just don't work out, they have that muscle weakening, or if you see some elderly, they have that muscle atrophy where their muscles aren't really defined. So there's several studies that show that demonstrate that the risk of having that low muscle tone increases as your bone mass decreases. There's also studies that show that forward hump, it's called kyphosis. So a lot of times that happens with poor posture, it happens with aging, it's really prevalent in those with Parkinson's disease or those with osteoporosis. So the more that you start to bend forward, the more gravity sets in. The more gravity sets in, the more you bend forward. And then the muscles weaken and you get this muscle imbalance. And it increases the pressure putting on your vertebrae, which increases your fracture risk in your vertebrae. And then also your balance. So balance, when you have muscle weakness, hearing loss, you start wearing glasses, and some people get neuropathy through diabetes or some other sources. These are all things that maintain your balance. So when you start to age and you start getting these things, it actually really makes falling more prevalent in your life. So what we do at Wellness 360 is we come in there and try to work on your balance. We work on your posture. We work on your muscle tone. All of these things together keep you more upright, keep your balance, and decrease your fall risk.
That's great. I think we want to talk about the research if the exercise can improve the bone density, as you've been talking about.
Yeah, so we are physical therapists that do these group fitness classes. So studies are really important to us. So anytime we start to design an exercise program, we dive in the books first because we want to make sure that what we're doing, the amount of times we're doing it, and what we're telling our participants is correct and it's evidence-based. So what we found in our research is that you can gain up to 20% of your bone density just with exercise. So exercise alone. There's a studies that show that your T-score, which is one of your scores when you have a DEXA scan, is that the neck of the femur is significantly increased with a combination, or the bone density in that area significantly increased with a combination of weight-bearing and non-weight-bearing exercise programs, which really helps support that exercise improves bone density after menopause. And then the force exerted by a muscle pulling on a bone and the muscle contraction has been proven to have strong osteogenic stimulus. So what that means is when a muscle, which is attached to your bone, when there's a great force applied to that muscle through a contraction, like through an exercise with a weight, it actually stimulates more bone growth because our body is a beautiful thing. What happens is our body accommodates what we put on it. So the stress load that we put on it, the body will say, you know what, we're going to end up getting injured. So we need to stimulate more bone cells. So there's this thing called Wolff's Law. It was from a German surgeon, Julius Wolff. And he states that the bone in a healthy person will adapt to the loads under which it is placed. So the bone will develop dependent on the stress and strain it undergoes. So the heavier weights you use and the more gravity assisted or against gravity exercises will actually stimulate that bone growth in those areas. Now, the studies do show that it doesn't help overall bone density. So it's really important, especially in our class, we work specifically with spine, wrist, and hips because that's the most commonly fractured areas. So we want to make sure we're getting the right amount of force on those areas to stimulate that, that bone growth.
Studies are fascinating, actually, the way you described.
Yeah, I think they are. They really are. Unfortunately, we get so many people that that they're like, well, I walk all the time, or I swim, or I bike. Now, walking is great for bone health, and I have seen a few studies that show that walking is great. I don't ever want to say walking is not good. It's just not proven to have as much bone density growth as some of the other exercises. So if you had to choose between one of these three, I would go with the walking. But what you need to do is increase the intensity, maybe walk a little faster. Make sure you're changing the terrain that you're walking on. And this goes back even to physical therapy. If you walk on the same terrain, sometimes your body can get injuries from doing that repeatedly over and over. Increase the timing that you're walking. So we're increasing time, we're increasing the duration, and incorporate some hills. Now, I don't know about California, but I know in New York, there's not a whole lot of hills where we're from. So, so you really got to find the right places. But swimming is not a weight-bearing activity. So studies show that it's great for your cardiovascular health. So if swimming is something you're passionate about, we never want you to go against what you're passionate about, because the more passion you have, the more you're going to do it. But you're going to want to make sure you're adding some weight bearing into that. And also my favorite is biking. Unfortunately, again, biking is not a weight bearing activity. Great for cardiovascular, which is really good for your heart and for your lungs, but just not great for stimulating bone growth.
Okay. So let's go to the topic of how long one should exercise to maintain a bone health.
So there isn't a whole lot of exercise information in the studies. So what we did find in the majority of the studies that we read is that 3 times a week is the most desirable, and trying to get 45 minutes to an hour of exercise. Now, I have seen a couple studies that say you can break that up, do more a week, but still get that 150 minutes of exercise in a day. But we tell our clients and our participants to try to at least get 3 days a week of 45 minutes to an hour. The one thing is, though, this is going to be a lifestyle process. This is not something that you can work out really hard for 8 weeks and get the bone growth and then go about your day-to-day life and not exercise. It takes a consistency of showing up those 3 days a week forever. It's something that you'll have to incorporate into your life. And that's going to help you, because just as we all know, the less that you exercise, and as soon as you walk away, your muscles start to atrophy again, and your balance will continually progressively get worse. So this is just something that will keep you safe, and something that is something you're going to want to incorporate throughout the rest of your life. So 3 types of bone strengthening activities. So weight training, we've already talked about the things that we shouldn't be doing, or that you should be doing. It's just you need to add a little more. So we incorporate weight training, balance exercises, and flexibility, because with all of these together, we're working on posture, you're working on balance, and you're working on building that bone mass density. So we're really helping to prevent that fracture risk, because if your posture is good and your balance is good, we are really taking a huge percent of that fracture risk out of the picture, or out of the equation. So weight training, moderate to high intensity, it's a lot of heavy weights. You can use dumbbells, you can use resistance training, you can use different body weight. You can use, like, yoga is a great thing, like using body weight. So, and again, if you're going to work, obviously you can do some upper body, but really pay close attention to your hips, your wrist, and your core specifically. Seeing those are the most fracture risk places in your body. But balance, you need to be at a level where you're challenging your balance. And this can be really scary to exercise. So it's really important to know what you're doing when you're practicing balance, to make sure you're in a safe place, and make sure that you have someone nearby when you're practicing the balance exercises. And flexibility, 2 to 3 times a week to promote flexibility and mobility.
So you would recommend these class? I mean, people even in their 30s or early on, you would recommend to incorporate these weight training, balance exercises early on rather than at a later point in your life.
Absolutely. As you know, because you deal with this all the time with all kinds of different ailments, prevention is always better than starting it after the diagnosis. That does not mean give up hope. I have the diagnosis, I can't do anything. There has been one of the owners of a business that I work for. His mom stopped taking her medication because she wasn't getting any better. Now, not that I recommend doing that, so don't take it that way, but she decided to do the all natural approach, and she changed her diet, she changed her lifestyle, and she started exercise. And her numbers significantly came up in her bone mass density. So you can reverse osteoporosis, but it's always better to start as young as you can. If you can start even in your 20s, because as soon as you hit 30, that's the max amount that you're going to have. So you're really working downhill from there. So you can certainly continue to weight train in your 30s and 40s, but I would just say for anyone with any diagnosis, weight training is going to be great for keeping your balance, helping with your posture, and helping you succeed through your daily activities in life.
So let's come to recommendations, your recommendations.
So there is some really great things that I personally love. This isn't for everybody, but Tai Chi. Tai Chi, not so great for your bone density, but it is wonderful for your balance and your mind, because that movement of that breath and body work can really help ease your mind. And if you remember back with our risk factors, having a high stressed life can cause your bone loss. So just decreasing those cortisol levels in your body. So Tai Chi is really good for just practicing that balance, getting that mind and body connection. Pilates, one of my personal favorites, since I am a Pilates instructor, is great for your core strength, and it's great for your posture. And it also has a lot of the breath work and the mindfulness aspects that decrease your stress levels. There are a lot of risk factors when dealing with osteoporosis. So I wouldn't suggest, if you have a significant DEXA scan score and you have osteoporosis, to go jump in a local Pilates class, unless you can talk to the instructor one-on-one, let them know that you do have this diagnosis and this condition, because it's really important to not do a lot of that forward bending that a lot of the Pilates moves have. Weightlifting, again, is wonderful for producing those forces that we talked about stimulating your bone growth. It's not super great for your range of motion, but it's okay to a certain point because you want stability in your joints. So I would choose some stability in the joints. So weightlifting is great for stabilizing those joints. It's great for building your bone density. It can produce orthopedic issues if you don't know what you're doing. So again, you really need to make sure you're working with someone that understands osteoporosis, understands the risk factors. So just talk to the person you're working with. You should be able to get a good idea of what they do and don't know. But it's really important when you're dealing with osteoporosis in an aging community, you want to make sure you're getting a balanced workout, because what about our posture? What about our balance? These are all elements that need to be put into that workout program for you. And then yoga. If you think about yoga, yoga incorporates all of these elements together. They work with posture, strength, balance. Yoga is free. You can do it anywhere. It has been around for thousands of years. And again, it reduces your stress because you have that mind-body connection. You have that deep breath work. You have the Shavasana at the end that's going to help decrease your cortisol levels, because the cortisol levels, they interfere with those osteoblasts, which are cells that build your muscle tissue or build your bone density. So if the osteoblasts aren't working properly, you're not going to get that strong bone mass density. And so really important. Stress reduction is really, really important when dealing with osteoporosis. So I thought this was a really important slide to add in here because if you decide to go out on your own or you already exercise and you take your local gym classes, please know you should not have any extreme forward bending and no deep twisting. So these are the two big no-nos when it comes to osteoporosis. So when you're doing yoga, you want to use a chair. So your back remains flat and you're not getting that forward hump when you're reaching towards the floor. You're always hinging at the hips. You're not hinging at the back. So no chronically forward back posture. Make sure when you're doing your core exercises, you're holding a neutral spine, which means not a lot of that deep twisting that you find in some of those classic exercise classes, and no crunches. If I can tell you anything today, if you're doing crunches, stop, because all that does is increase your poor posture and it puts way too much force on your spine. So also when you're doing yoga, avoid stretching, because remember we talked about joint stability. When you're dealing with osteoporosis, having really strong and stable joints is really important. So only stretch until you feel the pull and don't push through. And then avoid any kind of really deep hip opener exercises, because you can do some hip openers, but some of those, like the pigeon where you're on the ground, some of those are just a little too advanced. And remember, there's modifications for everything. So if you're working with someone who knows what they're talking about, they're able to give you safe and effective modifications for you.
So the crunches, most of the exercise people recommend crunches because of the belly fat. So I think there has to be modification for the crunches, right? What you just said,
Yes.
the crunches.
And that's really funny. I was actually just writing a blog for a future release. We're going to be doing a month program challenge, and crunches actually they do have nothing to do with your belly fat. Crunches, belly fat is all diet and cardiovascular. So the more crunches you do, the more it just encourages that forward hump, because you're building those muscles to pull you forward. So if you don't have the balance in your core, you're just going to end up working against yourself, which we're trying to open you up and bring your shoulders up and back, not work you forward. So crunches, really, to be honest with you, I haven't done a crunch since I was in my early 30s and I started to work in physical therapy, because crunches really aren't good for anyone.
That's good to know, because a lot of us are under the impression that you do crunches and you get rid of your belly fat. So that's really, really good to know what you just said.
Yeah, that is completely false. And I'll have to send you my 30-day challenge so you can learn the appropriate core exercises to do for your belly fat.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, moving on to yoga now.
Okay, so I personally love yoga, and that's why I started a YouTube channel that's completely free, only because there's so many of my clients that love yoga, and yoga is so good for you, but it's not always safe. So these are some really great, I chose the top 3 that I love to do. So we have the tree pose, or the Vrksasana. It strengthens your legs, your hips, it improves your core, your balance, and your posture. These are all the elements you want in an exercise program. So if you start to think, oh my gosh, she just told me all these things I need to do, here you go in one pose. So you can get all of them together in one pose. So this is, you can start, I have my foot kind of up my leg a little bit, but I have a lot of my people start by their toes on the ground. So you have that little tiny bit of support with having your toes on the ground beside you. The chair that I have there, I have it in that position because of what I was doing, but you can flip that chair around. You can put a wall behind you and a chair beside you to give you perfect amount of things to grab a hold of. And if you start to stumble, you'll just hit the wall and not the floor. So you can, you just root down in all 4 corners of your foot and start by placing your toes on the ground, and then you can slowly move your leg up into your inner thigh. That's really tough to do. So it takes a lot of years of practice and a lot of flexibility. But what I'm doing here in this pose is perfectly appropriate. The only thing you should not be doing is make sure that heel of mine, you can't tell because of the pants I'm wearing, is right below my knee. You don't want to put a whole lot of pressure on your knee, because you could be setting yourself up for some knee pain and knee problems. So just keep that foot below the knee, or your toes on the ground and work your way up. But this is really a great exercise for all of those elements. The chair pose. So it strengthens your lower extremities, your hip, and your spine. And actually, these are pictures taken out of our osteoporosis online program. So I was just screenshotting the pictures of some of the yoga stuff that we do. So your feet are parallel, your hips width apart, your hips are back, but you see my spine is nice and straight here. So there's no bend in my back, which is where you get into those fracture risk. You lift your toes to root your heels. So what I mean by that is you don't want your knees to go beyond your toes. Your toes should be nice and wiggly. So even if you're doing a squat, make sure the majority of your weight is in your heels and not your toes, because when the weight is in your toes, you're going to end up with a lot of severe, significant knee. It's too much pressure on your knees. So if you feel uncomfortable with this pose, put that chair behind you, and as if you're going to sit in a chair, just don't actually sit in the chair. That way, until you get used to having that rooting your heels into the ground, if you happen to stumble backwards, you're going to be caught by a chair, so you don't have that fall. So always pull in that abdomen, pull that belly button into the spine. But when you do that, make sure you're still breathing. A lot of my people, they pull that belly button in and all they're doing is using their diaphragm to hold their breath. So make sure you're still able to do that really nice and deep breathing, but you're really bracing your stomach as if you have a girdle wrapped around you. And really hold it as long as you can. Hold it until your legs start to get shaky. I always tell my people, hold it until your legs start to shake and then give me 2 more seconds, because those 2 more seconds are going to do the most good out of that whole time. So you don't want to overstress your body, but you do want to bring yourself right to that borderline of pushing your body beyond your limits.
Okay, moving on. I love this pose.
This is a great pose. And I have to say, I love doing it on the chair because this is not an easy pose to do. But again, the half moon pose, and if you are familiar with yoga, you are familiar with this pose. It helps with your balance, your lumbar strength, loading the thoracic and cervical vertebrae, your hips, bones, wrists, femurs, everything. This is the pose. So if you are going to be doing this at home, do me a favor and just make sure you have a wall behind you. That way, because this is a really tough pose. You want to make sure that if you start to stumble, that you have that support of the wall. Turn your foot parallel to the wall, bend your right knee slightly, and then place your hand on the seat. So I always have that little tiny bend in that stabilizing knee because you never want to lock that knee out. You always want to have that little tiny give. If I'm saying on a 1 to 100%, it's like a 10% bend. It's very slight, but it does help with your balance. So shift your weight onto your right foot and lift off the ground, place your hand on your hip. There is absolutely no need to have your hand out to the side. You can put your hand on your hip and then control your breathing. And that's where the fun comes in, is trying to hold everything in, do everything, but then have that breath moving fluidly in and out. But these 3 poses are great. Again, they have all the elements of the exercise you want for osteoporosis, plus the stress reduction portion of lowering your cortisol, deepening your breath, body awareness, which is huge when you have osteoporosis, realizing where your body's at in space, realizing, being in the present moment, because when we're in the present moment, we see that rug that's lifted on the corner. We see the dog toys that are in the corner that you might step on. So when you're in the present moment and you're living in that present moment, you're able to be more aware of your surroundings, more aware of your own body and how you're feeling.
That's great. So we want to open it up for questions. Before we open it up, you can reach us and let us know about the session. We have our emails here, and I do want to say that Beth would be coming with her online exercise program. We'll be offering it sometime, I think in a month's time or so. So with that, I do see some questions, Beth.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let me just pause. So the question is coming, what if you already have osteoporosis? What exercises can improve bone density?
So, exactly what we were just talking about. So, if you already have osteoporosis, you want to make sure that you're not doing forward bending and you're not doing deep twisting. So, those I always say that first, because if you decide to go to your local YMCA, or which I would never discourage that, they're wonderful programs, but just make sure that you're self aware, because knowledge is power. So, if you know you're not supposed to be doing those things, then you have enough power to know what you can and can't do in those classes. So I would really focus on the strengthening, the weight training. Now, in my classes that I teach, we use the resistance bands around the thighs, because when you're talking your hips, there are so many muscles attached to your hips, and there's so many fibers, muscle fibers, that go in all directions. So just that normal straight one-dimensional walking is great, but what about the side of the hip? I don't know if anyone's ever had like bursitis or something like that. There's a lot of muscles that work with your glutes, those hip abductor muscles, there's your hip adductor muscles. So there's a lot of other fibers that need to be hit in order to get all of that force on your pelvis. So use resistance bands, use heavy dumbbells. And when I say heavy, you want to be fatigued after 10 reps. So if you can do 30 and 40 reps with your weight, it is way too late. So you want to do something heavier, because you want to put that force against the muscles. So all of these muscles in your arm and legs, they attach to the bone through tendons and ligaments. So you want to really put that muscle strain and that muscle pull on those tendons against the bone. So I would definitely, again, yoga is my favorite personal thing to do, but weight training would be the next best thing.
That's great. We have another question. Someone has osteoarthritis as well as osteoporosis. You think they're asking what kind of exercise should be different that they should do for osteoarthritis?
So yes, actually, there are a lot of similarities. And in the program, the online program that you were talking about, we actually have a category for osteoporosis and a category for joints. So they are two different types of exercises. We design them, some of them overlap, some of them don't. But the one thing for osteoarthritis, you don't want to put a lot of bend in your joints. So we're trying to keep range of motion, but we're also protecting those joints, because if anyone that has arthritis in their knee, doing deep squats and deep lunges, it's not going to work for you. So what we do with osteoarthritis is we support the joints. So we work on the muscles all around the joint to bring more support to that joint area. And then we add in the flexibility component so that you're nice and you're stretched out, but yet you're nice and stable in that joint. Because sometimes a lot of osteoarthritis occurs, you start to really baby that muscle or baby that joint because it hurts. So naturally your body kind of compensates for that. So what we do is to support the joint, we start to bring balance back to that joint. So we do stretching. A lot of times it's elongated quads and shortened hamstrings in the knee, because we sit all day. So when you sit all day, your body's become imbalanced. So what we do is we come in and we keep that leg straight, but we start to really support the muscles all the way around it. So as long as you're not doing any deep bending, you want to, again, weight training, yoga, just really avoid the deep bending.
So deep bending is to avoid the most.
Yeah, deep bending for osteoarthritis, trust me, your body's going to tell you. And that's another good, just listen to your body. Our bodies talk to us all the time, but we're too busy here and too busy, to hear it. So we have to quiet the mind sometimes so that we can listen to the cues that our body's giving us. So your body's really smart. So my advice, if it hurts, don't do it. It's better safe than sorry.
Great. Any other questions from live audience? We are recording this video. We are going to put it on FB Live on YouTube. We would be circulating it, but any other questions live right now before we wrap up? Just want to take a moment if any other questions come. Otherwise, we are ready to wrap up. Okay, so I think thank you so much, Beth,
Yeah.
for educating the viewers. We will be coming back with the osteoporosis classes that Beth offers. We'll be sending all the details to you in few weeks. Before I wrap up, anything, Beth, you want to close with?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all so much for having me. This is a passion of mine. I just love helping, especially the aging population, take control back of their life and to be able to continue to do the things that they love. Because what's more important to someone is just to continue to do the things you're passionate about. So when you have grandkids and you have events and you have friends and you want to go hiking and you want to go biking, and I want to help you to do those things safely and effectively. So yeah, so just keep in contact with Nourish Doc and they will have all the information of our online subscription plan.
Great, thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to close the session. And thank you so much, Beth, for coming. And thank you all the viewers for watching our programs every week. Thank you. This is Amita.
Thank you.
Bye.